Hey, what's up? This is DJ Thunderous. I'm here with Jason Aaron Wood, professional guitarist, composer, recording artist, shred mentor, and author. What's up, Jason?
Hey, how you doing?
I hear you've had a lot going on.
Yeah, quite a bit. Quite a bit.
It's been quite a year for you. You had your 40th birthday. You have a new addition to your family. Congratulations, by the way, to baby August and
Thank you.
bringing him into this world. I bet you he's amazing.
I think so.
Very life-changing.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been. Everything leading up to him, in fact, was life changing even there too. So yeah, we really had to get ready.
Cool. So what else have you been up to?
Wow. So I think last time we spoke, I had probably just finished the Emanations album. I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was late 2017. At that point, my plan had been to do an album every single year, which is still kind of my thing. I missed last year, although I wrote one. I just didn't finish. All the music is composed and everything, but the vocals are recorded. I didn't really I kind of do lyrics when I do the vocals. I do it at the same time. So last summer is when we found the baby was coming, so kind of just dropped everything and started getting the house ready. And so during the month of August, I actually pretty much wrote the whole album, though. So it's just sitting there. I haven't really had a chance even since this year with the baby to really return to it too much. I know what the ideas are. My phone is loaded with notes about each song, but that's about as far as I got. I know what the concept is for each song. I've already cut a few of them from the lineup because I'm just tired of them. Yeah, I think so. I think it'll be much better than if I had done it while it was fresh in mind. Honestly, I think it's good to let these things sit sometimes, and in a way that might be better, like what I've done with other.
As you think along, you could change things up or, come up with even different ideas. And I know we're looking forward to hearing all of your new music.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that it'll definitely be good by the time it gets out. That's sort of I guess that's our attitude with Todesbonden too. If we've already kept people waiting this long, then it's going to be really damn good by the time people hear it. Because now it's, I've heard bands that I've waited a long time for their album just put something out just to give us something, and I wish they hadn't. I wish they waited and made it great.
Right.
Because I can really.
You guys are perfect together in that band, and I think it's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm looking forward to that, especially.
Yeah, we did return to that album a little bit this year too. It's just been really hard to get to any kind of project that takes a significant amount of time to really, at a time, so. A lot of that music is already written too. That's like basically just two albums sitting there waiting to get done at the 80 and 90% marks, really. I guess they're probably at about the same point, really. I think Old Sunroof has a little further to go, but we did actually return to Todesbonden a little bit earlier this year.
Yeah.
Because since the music is already recorded, there might be some basic things that I think we'll return to. Not totally sure how we're going to approach the drums. Like I've been very comfortable just programming drums for my stuff, for Jason Aaron Wood and Old Sunroof, but with Todesbonden, there's a label.
Yep.
And I don't know, they might have different opinions about that. I know people are generally not like on the fence about how they feel about programmed drums. They're usually totally fine with it, or like have absolutely no room for that in their tastes. So
to get like a session drummer in order to fill in the drums, then, if that would be the way.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's fine. I mean, that's what we did with the first Todesbonden album too. We had already worked with Tim, who had done the drums. He was our drummer in Rain Fell Within, and then Lori and I worked with him in Ephemeral Sun for a while too. And I mean, he's a fantastic drummer. So I mean, he was definitely an easy decision to make for the Todesbonden album. I do think he really definitely brought that material to another level too. So I mean, definitely great.
And do you get to choose the drummer that you want to go with, or how does that work?
Oh yeah, Yeah, that's one thing we've always had in Toto's Bonnet is freedom to have our vision, and we don't have any kind of push to do anything artistically different. I guess, I mean, Prophecy is, they are investing in us, and they do have some say in whether it gets past them and is getting released or anything. But really, I mean, they've pretty much just trusted us with the vision all along.
Yeah, and I know you also said in the past that you guys were changing up to make this new album even greater than the one before. What were the changes that you guys were making for this album?
Well, I mean, all right, when we started in 2004, it was just Lori and me, and we brought on Patrick to play violin on 2 of the 4 tracks. And, I mean, at that time, Lord of the Rings was new. That whole movie trilogy was just freshly new. It just came out, like the last of those 3 first movies came out the year before. And I think we were in a place where we were just kind of going for something that was like just huge and epic and didn't have, I mean, like, in a way, on paper, I think what happened with the next album with Sleep Now Quiet Forest on paper is exactly what that was, but there were a lot more prog kind of elements. I think I was in a different place mentally at the time, so I was definitely bringing more of a progressive thing to the table at that time. And that's basically after we got signed to Prophecy in late 2004, we put together a band. And I think we had some, I don't know, undeveloped ideas, I guess, about how to run a band at that time. And so we just were under the impression that you let everybody in the band and then you just let everybody start writing for their instrument. But that's not really how we look at it anymore. When we look at, if you look back at history at some of the greatest composers, they didn't bring in a committee of people to write with them. They just wrote the whole thing. The idea was solid, and it all worked together, and the players just played their parts. And that's, so in a way, for this newest Toto's Bonnet album, we've kind of, in a sense, gone back to our roots. I think we've changed a little bit as far as our influences, but at the same time, our vision for what Toto's Bonnet was supposed to be, I feel like it got a little bit off track. I mean, I think it's really good material on Sleep Now Quiet Forest, and that's, anybody that likes Toto's Bonnet is mostly basing it on that. So I'm not saying anything negative about that album. I think it's great. I think there are things I would probably have done differently now, but it would have been, I mean, I'm a different person now too. It's been a long time since that album came out, so
Yeah, and you guys
I think
really grown more, heading towards know what you want.
Yeah, basically. And so, I mean, like, I feel like we've explored that era, and in a way that was very much a natural progression from our EP. But now I think we're going to go back in a direction where it's pretty much, there's nothing progressive about this album. We were really going in more of a doom kind of direction in the first place, but like epic and like mixed with like cinematic music. Again, like Lord of the Rings soundtrack was like a very, very big influence from the start for Toto's Bonnet. And just, I mean, in a way, it's like we're influenced by eras of classical music that Lori and I don't necessarily even listen to as much, like Wagner, the orchestral element was always supposed to be part of this, and there's definitely a lot of that on the last album, but we're going to go in a much more classical direction, I think, for lack of a better word. It's like the most generic word I could probably have used for that, but we really want it to be just art. At the risk of sounding extremely pretentious, we really just want it to be just pure art, and we're trying to really just purvey a certain kind of just classical beauty through this music. So, and I mean, with over a decade since our last album, we've definitely had a lot of time to sift through material, and for that first maybe like 3 or 4 years after the last album, there was a lot of material written that'll just never see the light of day. I mean, because we were just sort of trying to find our way back to what sound we would have had. Mm-hmm. We had a bit of a lineup change, and so some of like I said, all the band members that we brought in were part of the writing all of a sudden, and that was, that's a very different set of influences all of a sudden. So
yeah, this is going to change.
Right, yeah, like where would we have been if that didn't happen? So it was a bit of a journey to kind of try to find that, and I was still I mean, I did write a lot of this material, and Lori and I worked on the material once it was sort of established in an initial form. We had to rework a lot of the stuff. Like we'd run into things where the melodies that the vocal lines were supposed to go over were the melodies that were already there were too strong, and it was just like parts were fighting with each other, and eventually we're just like, well, that melody right there, that's too strong, that's going to be the vocal melody then. It's not going to be whatever that instrument is playing. So we had to sort out, and I guess in a way we just had to learn how to write. So, that's helped a lot, because I mean, that material has been spanning, I mean, like, I think the earliest of the material that we decided we're definitely going to go with, that this is our sound, was from about 2012, and some of the most recent was about 2016 as far as the beginning of those songs, and they've evolved since then. So it was once we finally got into our groove, we finally kind of got an idea of how that music should go and what our sound's going to be. So it's been a process for sure, but I mean, I think people that like our music from the last album are going to be pleasantly surprised a bit by
I hope,
by how
because
this
I'm
comes out.
excited to hear it. Like I said before, I can't wait.
Thank you. Yeah, we will be. I was going to say we'll be really glad to get it done too, and move on to the next
And
thing.
I'm sure Lori can't wait, because I know she's super proud of her. The way she sings and everything. She's great.
Thanks.
Yep. All right. We're going to check out a tune by Total Spawner right now. Here's Surrender to Sea.
My desperation stores me. Each roar of a fighting chance to see through veils of burning water, dark seas envelop me. Breaking waves upon the sudden sand, holding me down as I reach, asking for a quickly fading land, shrouding me. Push through a liquid sand dune. Soft stones will bury me in sleep. Echoes a distant savior of shells and living things. Breaking waves upon the sudden sand, holding me down as I reach, asking for a quickly
great. That was Surrender to Sea. Can you tell everyone what album that was off of and why that's one of your go-to tracks?
Sure, yeah. That was from Toe Despondent's 2008 album, Sleep Now Quiet Forest. We actually chose that as an opening song because it was really one of our... we thought it was a really strong song to start with, and I'm sure we've probably actually opened quite a few of our live shows with that song, too. It's just... I think we wrote that song after a little while of working together at that time, so we kind of got into our groove in that lineup by the time we wrote that, so that one kind of really came together. I think it's one of our strongest songs, and it really does kind of convey this really epic soundscape that we were going for. So with everything I was saying about how that album got a little bit off track from what I guess we would have been as a band, I think it's probably the closest to that vision. And I think that even with the things that are maybe a bit different from what we would have been as a band, I think that it's really... I'm very happy with how that song came out.
Now, is that one of Lori's favorites, or what does she prefer?
I think so too, yeah. I think some of the things that she did in that song are especially among the things that she would like to showcase too.
Now, how many full releases does Toe Despondent have? 2, correct?
Well, yeah, we self-released an EP that was in 2004, and we kind of just shopped that around to labels for a minute. We got attention on it really, really quickly and got signed, but it was a few years before we put another one out, and that was on the label. That was the one that had that song on it, but that was Sleep Now Quiet Forest. So we have one that we self-released, and then we have the full length, and then we have the one that we're working on now, which will be, I don't know when it'll be, but eventually.
Hey, you'll get to it when you can. Just, keep pushing it.
Yep.
It's going to be amazing when you guys are finished.
I hope so.
All right. Well, let's check out the second track that we picked out to play for Toe Despondent today, Battle of Kadesh. right, you guys just listened to Battle of Kadesh. I like that song myself. I've always liked that one. As soon as I hear it on the radio, I know what it is right away.
Yeah, that I feel like that one has a kind of a more distinctive opening, that you just hear that crash, and then
Yep.
as soon as you hear Laurie's dual vocals, it's just like it. To me, that's like the most magical song on the album. That is definitely my favorite, my personal favorite Toe Despondent song out of all of them that are out so far. That by far.
Yeah. I've always liked that one. I think it's really cool. So what's going on with your project, Jason Aaron Wood?
Since Emanations, I haven't really been working on that. The album that I started working on right after that was really an Olsonuf album, and that's, although they're both my one-man bands, they're really quite separate from each other. So on the Jason Aaron Wood front, though, I am actually doing things, but I'm kind of just trying to, I don't know, in a way, Jason Aaron Wood is, since it's me, it's really more like the umbrella that covers everything, including Olsonuf and Shred Mentor Rock Guitar Academy as well. So right now I'm kind of using that as a platform to sort of gain visibility for everything I've done on all three of those projects. So Olsonuf, Jason Aaron Wood, the recordings, as well as Shred Mentor, where I kind of point to the other two recording projects that I've done under my own name and be like, cool, now you want to do something like that too? Here's how we do it. So they're all kind of interrelated to each other, and I'm kind of purposely tangling them together because they are very much integral parts of what I'm doing. So right now, I'm really just doing like a lot of video lately. My new project, I've done 2 new videos this week, but I think like I've kind of under focused on having people actually see me play, and it seems harder and harder to get people on social media to like click on a track and just listen to it, because it's just flooded with so many musicians. Just check out my track, check me out, check this out, check this. Like at this point, you just scroll past, So if you see somebody's fingers moving at some crazy speed, though, you might be like, what does that actually sound like? And they might actually stop and listen to it. So, and that might actually, if they like what they hear there, then maybe they just seem a lot more likely to check out the rest of the music at that point.
Or actually just pay attention instead of, just clicking on like and going by.
Yeah, I mean, I would really like people to truly actually enjoy the music and, not just, maybe take a few seconds out of their day and just listen to part of it, because I think that we're just kind of it's just so oversaturated with so much music.
Mm-hmm.
You can't possibly listen to it all. And I mean, to be frank, it's not even all good out there. There's, now that everyone in the world can record their own album at home, no matter where they are in their musical journey. I mean, there have always been just as many unskilled musicians, just now they can make albums too, and now you have so much more to sift through. People don't want to take it as much of a chance, because, I mean, if you you can usually tell right away when something's not all that great, and so if you take your time out of your day to check something out, and that's what you did it, not like it's necessarily rational to assume everything you're going to listen to after that's going to be, bad too. But if you feel like you wasted your time checking out, just another internet band, it just kind of stops being magical, and you're a little less inclined to do it again. So we have to look for new ways, and not like video is a new way or anything at this point, but I've kind of just been noticing the way I'm going about it really isn't really getting nearly enough exposure for what I had.
And even good or bad feedback, it's still accepted, and that's a good thing for you, because that'll help you down the road.
Right, yeah, exactly. So I feel like I need to just at least get more eyes and ears. And if I can get eyes on what I'm doing, at least maybe I'll get more ears on it too. So I'm kind of shifting gears now.
And you don't want to be yelling at people neither. You'd rather have them enjoy your music instead of hearing you yell, "Hey, listen to this! I'm Jason Aaron Wood,"
Yeah, I think that's perilously close to just giving myself praise, and that's just, it doesn't really work if you're doing it yourself. So getting enough people to hear it and maybe say what they think is good about it will definitely go a much further distance than me telling people how great I think my own music is, because I'm obviously going to be biased.
And a lot of people don't even like their own music.
I know, there's a lot of music of mine I don't like, and my solution to that is you just don't ever get to hear it.
But then again, you should share it and let people listen, and maybe they might like it, and you might like it better after you hear that.
I'm still going to sift through. As a policy, I actually go through and I look for the weakest tracks and delete them from my track lineup for every album now. It was painful the first time. Like on my first solo album, on Reflections, every song I had went on that album. For that album, everything I intended to write, that was pretty much, I think, just about everything before that on anything else I was on. Every song we had went on the album too. And then for Ol Sonuf, which was for Glass Idols, my first album after that, I actually cut a couple of songs.
Yep.
I think 4 songs got cut from that, and it was painful because I was like, it hurt what I thought my vision of that album was. But for the next album, I had 6 songs in mind. I cut 1, and I was like, you know what? This album's so much better without that album and without that song.
Yep.
And I started to realize, you know what? By the time the next one came around, I cut like 3 or 4. I go out of my way to cut songs.
So you're not
like some stuff
hiding them somewhere. Then that's a good thing.
Well, I mean, I do. They're on my hard drive. I mean, they're just not good enough to be on the album, and they're not good enough for public consumption. I don't. What I'm thinking is, like, it's hard enough to get people to listen to music at all. So what I really don't want to have happen is one of my duds getting out there, and that where people discover me and they're like, that was like my one chance to make a good first impression, and they hear my weakest material. In general, as just a bit of music industry street smarts, I think that's a good idea for anybody to just don't put out. Basically, yeah. And I'm going to quote an old friend of mine, my photographer Brian Minix. He once told me, "Don't show him your crap." Basically, never show him your crap. It's appealing to think that people will understand what you were going for and just give you a pass and like, yeah, that's a cool idea. No, they're not. There's so much incredibly professional stuff out there, whether it be music or photography or any other kind of art, that no one knows what you meant to do. They only know what you're showing them. And so I think it's good to just, really kind of have a little bit more of an objective look at your own work and see what the best of it is and only put that out.
And don't show them your crap.
Yeah, don't show them your crap because they won't understand. And it might be the thing that they first check out from you, and if you show them your crap, maybe that's all they're going to take the time to look at.
Right.
They saw it first.
Well, that's good. That's a good quote.
Yeah, it stuck with me. He told me that when we were like, I think in high school. So I've been carrying that quote for a long time, and it's just, I think it was one of the earliest pieces of wisdom that I ever encountered, really.
Well, it's always good to remember things like that because down the road you need them,
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, speaking of Jason Aaron Wood tracks, I'm going to play one of my favorites again. Here's Emanations. Crank it up. All right, that was my favorite track from Jason Aaron Wood. That was Emanations.
Yeah, thanks for playing
Oh,
that.
duh. It was big. So I was going to sleep or something. No, I really like that track, and I think I told you that was going to be your son's lullaby.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely going to hear it a bunch. That's for sure.
And why is that one of your favorite tracks? I know you like that too.
I think, well, right now, partially because it's one of the most recent. I think there's always some special feeling toward one of the most recent things you've done, but also being most recent, it's also a product of having learned a lot from the things I did before it, so I was able to achieve it better. I think it's one of the darker kinds of sounding songs that I've done under my own name rather than Ol Sonoof, which is automatically going to be dark by comparison. But I just really like how that came out. I mean, that song actually came together rather quickly. I wrote it in just a couple of days, but I feel like the melodies, the melody wasn't even written on guitar originally. The opening, well, not the intro guitar, but once the full quote unquote band kicks in, the lead guitar melody wasn't even actually, that was the first part of the song that ever manifested, but I actually wrote it on just MIDI, just on the screen using a mouse, and it was written on a piano interface, and I had to kind of adapt it to figure out how to actually make that work on the guitar. So it's actually probably the hardest thing to play on the whole album, even despite all the much faster things that happen. It's just because it wasn't written for the guitar neck at all, so it's incredibly difficult and requires a lot of contortion of my hands to try to get them in the right place at the right time. So I feel like it's an achievement in a lot of areas, and I also feel like it was I always tend to put, I think, one of my favorite songs of whatever album as the first song, just so that whoever's listening to it gets drawn in right away. But I think I also did a better job with the production on this album too. So I feel like the song hits pretty hard.
It does.
And it's also thank you. It's also a song that it's the first of them that I really started to do with as part of the all 8-string guitar concept that kind of went into that album. And I guess lyrically, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, is it tough with the 8-string guitar to get that going?
It was a little bit. I mean, like I was very slow to adopt 8-string guitar at all. I started with 7-string as just by necessity back in Rain Fell Within in 2001, just because I just wasn't. They wrote a bunch of stuff for 6-string guitar, but like tuned as if it were the lower 6 strings of a 7-string, and I really need the first string because that's important. I was going to have to go with like a handicapped guitar, and most of the cool things I feel like I can do, even back then, required a first string. So I was like, all right, if that's what we're playing here, I'm going to get a 7-string now. But for a long time, I thought of 8-string as sort of just unnecessary. It was like, all right, now it's getting gimmicky. And I mean, some of how even 7-string is used can be gimmicky. It's not like I don't feel like I was wrong exactly. I think I was just hyper focused on a more gimmicky use of it. And eventually, having picked one up in about 2011, I started to open my mind up a little bit to like seeing some of the possibilities of how I could expand the things I already do onto a guitar that covered that much more range. And so 2012, I bought one. I waited about a year to really do anything because I still get a little disoriented on a guitar with that many strings. It's like strings start looking like each other a little bit, and it's easy to get lost. But I mean, I'm pretty comfortable with it now. I'm 7 years in now, so I guess I get kind of comfortable with it now by this point.
Now, can you teach the 8-string to someone typically, or?
Yeah, I do. Actually, I mean, I sometimes actually I find that the 8-string is really, really good for teaching, as long as you can kind of prep the student to just be like, look, I know this looks overwhelming. Don't worry about this. I teach people who only have 6 strings sometimes using an 8-string just to kind of show them how the patterns that we're playing on a 6-string would have continued on the next string. So it doesn't have to be an imaginary string. So in either direction, if you go too low, you go too high, you run out of additional strings you can play. In a way, this kind of shows them what would happen on the next string over.
Oh, that's cool.
So I find it really useful for that.
Have you ever taught anyone to play your own, riffs and things like that from Jason Aaron Wood or Old Sanouf, or do you tend to teach different things?
I usually tend to I have normally led people away from using my music. I've always kind of, as a student, perpetually, I have always sort of not enjoyed the idea of like learning guitar by learning just other people's stuff. I feel like it can be very satisfying if you really want to play that song, but I always find it to be a little bit of just kind of laziness on the part of the guitarist. Not that, if that's what the student wants to learn, I think it's great, but I think that for me, it has always been perilously close to just making clones of myself and not really doing a real, like, far-reaching service. Like, I don't feel like teaching my own material is like a hard-hitting activity. It's not a high-yield activity that's going to lead to, like, musicianship that can be used elsewhere.
Right.
And I think that's sort of the danger of how accessible tablature is on the internet. It's like, it's assuming it's even correct and not created by like a 12-year-old after school with, the trained ears of a 12-year-old, which is not very trained. Assuming it's even correct, you're still only learning to do that thing that way, one way. It's not like, it may or may not occur to the person learning it how to actually apply that in their own way, how to do their own musical thing, how to do anything musical with it at all, aside from just recite what another musician came up with. So I feel like it's sort of it's too much of a baby step. Mm-hmm. For people who are not babies. We can take much bigger steps than baby steps.
Exactly.
When you're intimidated by something, it's very appealing to say, oh, look, I'm going to make this simple for you. Let's just take baby steps. But that is underwhelming, really. I think that people reach for a guitar because they want to play it really well, because they see somebody playing it really well and making it look easy, and then they pick it up and it's really a lot harder.
Yeah.
But only because it's not a terribly intuitive instrument necessarily, and you end up having the same note like 6 times sometimes, and which one are you going to play it at? How are you going to approach it? And there's just so many variables that it can get very overwhelming very quickly, and then you take lessons and then you don't get any further along because that lesson is just based on some nonsensical idea or misguided attempt to try to be systematic, but not in a systematic way that actually has anything to do with what real life musicians need to be able to do. So I've always approached it like I have been in a lot of different situations. I have played live all over the U.S. I've been in 2 different signed bands. I recorded albums. I've done things from a few different angles. I've written some music that even appeared in a National Lampoon film, and so I've got a taste of things from a bunch of different angles. And looking back on those experiences and the things that I needed to be able to do each of those functions, those are the things that inform how I teach people. And so I've sort of crystallized things into what I mentioned as high yield activities. There's certain activities, not all activities give you the same results. Not all activities even give you any results or any good ones. They might foster really bad habits that you later have to work your ass off to unlearn. There's a lot of ways to do that, but there's not a lot of them that. So I've sort of always been looking at the things. What do you actually need to be able to do? What individual little contained bits of knowledge will take you across your entire career? Like knowing what the chords are in every key, or in a minor scale. Minor, diminished, major, minor, minor, major, major. I give that to like every student I meet eventually, if they stick around long enough. And that's the thing to show them at that time. But like just knowing that little thing, just reciting it about 100 times to yourself in the car on the way home. Minor, diminished, major, minor, minor, major, major. If you can just play the chords in that order as you ascend the scale, you know every single minor scale.
And then you're good, because then you can make your more creative.
Yeah, you can just churn out a chord progression really quickly that follows the scale right away. You don't have to keep dicking around wondering if you're in the key and what, it just saves you a lot of wasted time to memorize bits and pieces of knowledge you are absolutely going to need again and again. So, unfortunately, until you've gotten to a point where you know what is actually like musically applicable, you don't even. A lot of people are not actually qualified to identify what is a high yield activity or not.
Right.
That's sort of the hardest thing. So I have to reach everybody because it's not terminology that anyone else is using really. It's me trying to describe it as accurately as possible. So it's a term that, as far as I know, I'm the only one using it. But it's
It's like to me that you enjoy teaching people your knowledge and to showing them an easier way, and so they're not fighting with themselves over it. And if they're really enjoying it, they'll learn it.
absolutely, yeah. That is my other passion aside from making music, is to pass it on and to help people get a result as soon as I possibly can. If possible, I try to give somebody that sort of aha moment every time that they're with me,
That's cool.
because that's the kind of fuel, aside from it being fun when you practice, which is absolutely necessary. So a lot of people think practice is, it just feels like a chore to even say the word practice. You got to practice, you got to take out the trash, yeah, it's no, if it's on par with taking out the trash, something very important is missing from the process. Because if it's not fun, you might have a wind of inspiration this week and you'll practice, but as soon as that drive dies out, or something else big in your life comes along and distracts you from it, that is going to just stop happening altogether.
Yep.
And then everything you worked for so far is going to start slipping away, and you're going to have to work much more additional time just to get back to where you already were. So you lose progress. There's not really any standing still. So it's just making it fun, but also having these breakthroughs frequently. Because, I mean, when I look back over, it's been like 27 years I've been playing now, that's not something I brag about ever. I wouldn't, because the thing is, I didn't spend 27 years actually progressing. It was just over the period of 27 years, a bunch of individual little epiphanies happened, little breakthroughs that enabled me to do new things whenever I want. And until you can do it whenever you want, you kind of have to keep working it until you get that breakthrough that is like, oh, if I just do it this way, I can do it, and I can stop thinking about it. So that's sort of where I try to. And so, I mean, as soon as we can get things that you have to think about and work really hard at right now to be things you don't ever have to think about at all, and you just do it naturally and take it for granted, I mean, it just keeps being a struggle. So I try to get people to that point as soon as they possibly can, and much sooner than step 1, step 2, step 3, based on whatever random idea that those steps are based on.
Yeah.
So it has to be, it has to be based on the person you're teaching, and that's where, unfortunately, that's where musical education in general, for all instruments, has sort of suffered a little bit from like this fierce traditionalism. I've been studying a bit with piano lately too, and kind of getting back to playing that a lot more lately. And
that's awesome.
It's the same thing. I mean, it's a certain traditionalism, and it's like this sort of attitude that, like, if it was good enough for the founding fathers of this style of music, it's good enough for me. But like, I'm going to come out and say it. No, it isn't. It's not good enough, because those founding fathers were figuring it out as they went. Mm-hmm. And so they were making the whole thing up, and it was a product of experimentation, and then document it, and then, okay, don't mess with that. I'm still working on that. That's a rule right now. I mean, we've come a long way. And so I'm sure, I mean, J.S. Bach was still probably one of the most brilliant composers of all time, and definitely prolific, with over 1,000 pieces to his name. But it's not, just because he's taught his sons that way doesn't mean that that's the best way to learn that in the year 2019.
Yep.
And we've come a long way, and the instruments that he played are not even really in use, aside from in historical ensembles that aim to specifically play instruments that sound as close to what they think that time period sounded like. So it's not like so much has changed, and education in like every other area outside of music has been able to and been encouraged to sort of evolve so that we can get more effective training in less time, and new methods, and that's not allowed to happen because hundreds of years ago somebody who did a great thing learned it this way, so now we all have to go through their, it's like, when a when there's a path. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. And so you're sort of, honestly, it's almost like people are sort of indoctrinated early on that this is the way, the holy path to learning music, and no wonder so few people really actually have a satisfying experience with music. Most people stay at the beginner level of whatever instrument they're playing and learning, and they might retain it if they got anywhere with it, and if not, they might play around with it, or they just give it up. And that's sad, because
they stay in the same box, I think.
Yes, I see that a lot. In fact, I see that with most of the people who reach out to me, because I always do like a free introductory session with everybody that reaches out to me interested in lessons, because I want to get an idea of like what are they actually like, what does it look like when they practice? What are they doing now? Mm-hmm. anybody who's been playing for any amount of time has surely got some of the pieces to fall into place. And that it's always easier for me to figure out what. I'm not trying to reteach them the whole thing just because here's the whole system. I don't have like one whole system
Right.
that I think every musician should be. I think that's just I think that happens way too often, and without intending it, it's actually very arrogant to assume that you have the definition of what a musician should be and to impose it on every single person you ever talk to. And it's, like I said before, it's kind of lazy, because what if a doctor did that? What if you go to a doctor and he just tells you exactly what he's decided he's going to tell every other person that comes into his office? That I hope not. You need a new doctor, because it's the same thing. It's like you're not teaching one thing, and there's a lot more that could be wrong with it. So you have to like look at what the person's doing, what are they not doing, and try to get to the core of what is missing here, what could be improved. And it's sort of like sculpting, really. You're just, you start with a ball of clay, and maybe you want to make a head out of it. All right, so let's make some impressions of where the eyes ought to be, and as we go, what do the eyebrows need to look like, and just kind of, okay, so with a musician, I'll look at what does their practice actually look like? What are they thinking about?
Mm-hmm.
What are they not thinking? What do they never do? Is it on the list of high yield activities? Often it is. I usually find all the things that I find that have given me the greatest results in the shortest amount of time and the most satisfying overall experience as a musician are absent entirely from the what people are practicing when I talk to them at first. So I have to kind of...
It's kind of like what they're looking into too, as well, because some people might have this vision, other people have this vision.
Mm-hmm.
Some people were taught this, and some people were taught that, and it's the brain. It really.
It is. I always say guitar playing is 100% mental. There's just also a physical side.
Yep.
A lot of people like to say things are 99% mental. No, anything your physical body actually has to do is being controlled by your brain, so it's actually 100% mental. There's just also a physical element.
Yep.
So yeah, it really does. It's entirely a mental exercise. There's just also some muscle involvement that has to happen too, and some development. But really, your brain does everything your body does first. And if your body's doing it without control, then your brain's not doing it well enough yet. So it's really entirely a mental exercise. So yeah, I like to approach it in a way that I know I can get results for people, and that's all part of the drive with Jason Aaron Wood video campaign right now too, is just kind of get myself out there as a guitar player, and maybe strike that little chord with people that makes them want to play like me, and because I've kind of neglected that a little bit in favor of just pure education. But let's face it, going to school isn't exactly the most inspirational thing when you think about it. Maybe your first day at kindergarten it might be, but after you've been forced to go to school for a while, going to school isn't exactly exciting for people. And so I'm going to try to take another route. And so I've been... Go ahead.
Thing with my son when he was growing up, there's so many people out there that are just settlers. They stop and they just settle for whatever. They don't want to go further.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yep.
It's crazy.
And I can understand that all too well, too. I know I've been there quite a few times, and it's just, once you do something somewhat well, it's very tempting to just stay there and be satisfied with that. And you can...
Yep, you get that comfort.
I mean, right, yeah, totally. And so that's why I always look at what I'm doing is just expanding the comfort zone. High yield activities in a way are really just to do that. I mean, I have things I still can't do. There will always be things I still can't do, but I keep trying to identify them and try to do them anyway. And at least the things I'm comfortable doing now, are things that at one point I couldn't even I literally could not even conceive of them. It just, the idea of doing what I do naturally now just didn't even occur to me at one point in my life. So that's where I'm kind of trying to approach it, as just expanding a person's comfort zone, walking them through the experiences of playing things. In fact, even walking someone through some of the failures that I know they're going to have to make in order to solve a problem, because a lot of this is just problems. So I'm like, okay, cool, let's do this now. And then I'll sit back, watch them make the inevitable mistake they're going to make. Okay, cool, what happened there? What was supposed to happen? What did happen? What is your hand going to need to do? You understand what it needs to do. What did your hand do? What do you need to think about to make that happen differently? Just walk them through the thought process of how to ultimately be their own teacher.
Which then they can figure it out down the road. If they start making those mistakes again, they think, oh, well, I got to go back and redo it that way.
Exactly. So
where can everyone reach you for lessons and things like that? I figured while we were on that subject, people are probably listening and probably very interested because it sounds like I'd want you as my teacher.
Oh, thank you. Well, the main place, if someone's looking for actual lessons and they're really ready to do the hard work, but learn to work smart and basically work toward very specific goals, and maybe even think about how to really clearly define those goals in an achievable way, then shredmentor.com is the main place to go. There is a form where I'm going to ask you to fill out basically what your inspirations are, specific actual tracks, like at least 5 of your influences, so I can get a little bit of an idea of what direction you're trying to go in with your own music, so that I'm not just like handing you like Jimi Hendrix or something and you're trying to play like Necrophagist or something. It's just I want to get as direct to the core of what you want to sound like. But that would be the main place to go if you're looking for actual lessons. Now I know that that's not the thing everybody is ready for, so another place to go would be the Shred Mentor YouTube. So youtube.com/C/Shred Mentor. You just go to /Shred Mentor basically. But the Shred Mentor YouTube is the next place to go. There are 201 free lessons that I did last year. I basically did a lesson series called Challenge of the Day. And there were going to be 200, but I accidentally lost count early on and did day 23 twice. So there's 2 for that. So there's 201 of them now. 6 months of free daily lessons that you can just watch whenever you want. Those are pretty challenging. So a lot of it is depending on where somebody is with their playing. They might need to reach out to me for lessons to be able to like use that in their own musical way. But that would be probably the next way. Also, along with that, there is another site that I started last year, which is a little less involved as far as like active lessons, but it's shredmentoronline.com, and I have lesson packs. Some of the videos I've done recently, so far I've done 3 of my etudes, which are all neoclassical in style at this point. They're probably going to stay that way, but I've written about 35 different etudes over the years, and so this one I just put out last week, which is the 3rd one of them that I've released, was from 8 years ago. So I mean, they're at over time I just keep coming up with compositions that are musically pleasing to listen to, fun to play, and they work as performance pieces, but they really expose the person playing it to whatever the focus of it is. So this is a lot of focus on sweep picking in this case. And also, it's going to be part of a bigger thing that I'm working on right now, which is an online course on sweep picking. So that etude and several more are going to be part of that too. So that's all on shredmentoronline.com. And that's where you can buy lesson packs that have like the tablature in PDF format as well as Guitar Pro format, so you can play along to it. And along with that, there's also like the backing track in the 3 versions, basically. The original with my actual solo, the original minus my solo, but with like a harpsichord playing it, and then just the backing track with no guide melody whatsoever. So you kind of have a couple different options for what you play along to, and also the video of me playing it, so you have a demonstration of where I'm playing it, what fingers I'm using, and all that stuff.
That's really cool, Jason. You have a lot of good things going on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let's give everyone a taste of Jason Aaron Wood. Here's Doubt. Crank it up. Oh, yeah, that's another great track there by Jason Aaron Wood. As you all know, I'm here with Jason Aaron Wood, and Doubt is an excellent track, I have to say.
Thank you very much. That was, that was like the only one on that album from Escape that was not really part of the concept. In a way, it's almost like a misplaced Olsonuf song. But it's really, in a nutshell, that song is just, the common saying is the truth will set you free, but not necessarily, especially if a lie is being referred to as the truth. You're very likely to get ensnared by something masquerading as the truth if you don't have an automatic element of doubt about just about everything. Just be slow to believe anything and everything. And, that's because belief in one false principle is the beginning of all unwisdom.
Amazing. I like it. I think it has a lot of feeling to it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
So when you're writing lyrics and things like that, how do you know what lyrics are going to be for which project?
I don't. I really don't. Lyrics are always the part that they always come last, and it's partially because I like to write them to the music once I know how it goes. Only because that's mostly how I've always written. I don't think I really have any songs that I had lyrics already and then wrote the music around it.
Okay.
It's just, lyrics don't come to me as easily. I'm hypercritical of lyrics that come out of me especially, but even just music I listen to. So I've always listened to metal, but some lyrics strike me as epic, and a lot of lyrics really don't. It's very easy to come up with bad lyrics. And it all comes down to what someone's going for. So I mean, I'm not the objective judge, for anybody, but I just don't, I don't expect much from lyrics in metal a lot, but when I do put out some, I at least want to put well-thought lyrics in there and have some mixture of philosophy and poetry and something historical, maybe a little bit of a play on words. I do like puns, although I don't think I've thrown any direct puns into anything, but I do love wordplay.
Would never want me to be in a band because there's some tunes I come up with in my brain that, oh God, people would be like, what the hell is wrong with her? Sing to my animals. It's like crazy. And I'm not going to tell you what I sing to them because...
Oh, that's okay.
I wouldn't be able to make a children's album. I was thinking I would have like a child concept album, but it probably wouldn't sell.
It's probably good that my baby doesn't understand what I'm saying most of the time right now either, because some of the made up songs I come up with on the fly are probably not too child friendly either. But
I'll be like cooking or something, and something will trigger a song, and I don't know, and then I come up with my own lyrics for it. And
oh yeah, I love that. I love doing that.
I think they're funny.
Oh yeah, it's fun.
And people look at me like, yeah, you're sick. You really have.
Oh yeah. That's one of the most fun things to do, I think. Just changing the lyrics to a song and seeing if you can make the whole thing work still.
Yep.
I'm always delighted by wordplay like that. That's always fun.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. So Olsonuf, how did you come up with that name? And tell us about that project.
So that's my oldest project. That was what I was kind of doing amongst myself back when basically I grew up in South Jersey, and at the time in the mid to late 90s, there just wasn't anybody doing the style of metal I would have wanted to do. Metal was still somewhat underground at that point, so basically the only metal bands that most of the people I knew listened to were Metallica and Pantera, and while I appreciate both of those bands, it's not really something I wanted to do. It's nothing like the style I really was going for. So it just I wasn't finding anybody that really wanted to do the same kind of thing. So in a way I was kind of just forced to, I still knew what I wanted my vision to sound like, and I knew which bands influenced what and all that stuff, but there wasn't anybody playing the kind of stuff. So I kind of had to just make it happen in one form or another. So with Olsonuf, I just kind of, it wasn't originally called that. Originally the name was Atzag Belial, which I sort of made a reference to in my song Enchanter Destroyer on the last album, Emanations. That's a little bit of a shout out to that original project. That's basically what Atzag Belial means. Atzag is enchanter, based on Sumerian, and Belial in that particular spelling is basically just wickedness or destroyer. So that's exactly all that really was. I sort of created a little mythology around what I meant by that name.
Mm-hmm.
But But those were basically the two elements I really wanted in my music. I wanted to sort of enchant people with melodies that I thought were beautiful and strange changes in the harmony, but that still work melodically. But I also wanted to be heavy, so there's the destructive aspect of it. I wanted it to be really dark and heavy, but still strangely beautiful. So that was sort of what I was going for all along with my music. A couple of years later. That was like 1996 or 7 that I came up with that project. And in the year 2000, I was just reading the Enochian keys and just looking at the translations for them. These are basically incantations that were written down by Dr. John Dee and Sir Edward Kelly during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, supposedly from their communications with angels, more like the Watchers of the Book of Enoch, which I guess would be more the fallen angels, but whatever, it's the language of the angels. And so I was reading through these incantations, and I got to the first key and was just looking at it, and it starts with the two words, Ol Sonuf, but actually it's Ol Sonuf Vare Saji, which means I reign over you. But it means I reign, and since it was already a solo project, I decided, instead of what I was going to do with that, I was going to just create like a dark ambient project, called that, and never ended up doing that, but the name was still there. So sometime in the year 2000, I decided to change the band Adzag Bilal to be called Ol Sonuf, and I thought that was very fitting for a one-man band, because really I was the only one making the decisions in the band, and as far as the concepts that I wanted to deal with, I was always going for a sort of a dark and iconoclastic approach, kind of influenced by my views on religion in that aspect. Mm-hmm. Rather than being subservient to an impersonal God that, as far as I'm concerned, someone else created based on their ideals. Oneself as one God, one's own God, is more what I was going for with that. So I thought that those first two words were especially good, and I knew nobody else out there had them, so it was definitely a name I could go with. And so I decided to go with a name I'm going to have to answer forever. How do you pronounce it? But Ol Sonuf is how I say it.
Ol Sonuf.
That was sort of the short story of it. That's the short version, sadly.
You were talking about you were reading incantations. Were you reading them out loud or just personally in your head?
It depended on the context. I mean, those are part of various types of rituals of various occult groups, from the Golden Dawn to the Church of Satan. I mean, it just depends on where you're getting them from.
Yep.
But I was going off of the translation that would have originated with Aleister Crowley, but I studied them from multiple sources because they're pretty old and they've been filtered through just a couple of different sources over time. But I mean, I was at this point I was just studying them quietly to myself. Mm-hmm. Just kind of get a little bit of just trying to get the gist of the language because it's just so bizarre.
Oh, I'm sure it is. It's got to be like
the letters themselves in most languages. The name of the letter of a language generally has something to do with the sound that letter makes, but not in Enochian. It just is incredibly difficult to memorize, and there's all these different symbols that look nothing like any other language, and they're all syllables in and of themselves, so what you actually see written out in English is actually nothing like how it's pronounced either. It's just really many layers thick to try to...
Pretty interesting, though, I bet.
I find it to be, yeah. I think it's really an interesting time period that it all comes out of, too, because there was just this across Europe. I mean, the Protestants and Catholics were at each other's throats because the freshly new split in the church. And so with that came the witch trials all over Europe as a kind of a response to that in a way. And along with that came this interest at that time. It was kind of the phase of people to, on the down low, try to contact angels.
Yep.
It's just part of a bigger trend going on across Europe. But Dr. John Dee he was among those who were interested in that. So
that's neat. All right, we're going to check out some Ol Sonuf here. It's Iconoclast. Crank it up. right. That was just Iconoclast, another one of my favorites. I really like that. What is the meaning of Iconoclast?
Literally, breaker of idols. So in the day and age when we live, I was attacking the sacred cows directly. With Olsonuf, with the albums that I've been putting out, they're basically following a certain symbolic pattern right now. Essentially, the very first album, Glass Idols, was sort of just an introduction, sort of the preliminary invocation, but it's almost like a magical ritual that I'm doing through each of these albums. With Iconoclast, that is the first of 4 albums that corresponds to one of the 4 magical elements. So that one would be fire, representing anger and wrath. That would be my more just angry album for Olsonuf. And so that being the title track and the intro to that album, I pretty much just went right for the jugular. There are a few different points I kind of wanted to make through that song, but also deliver them in I guess in a style. I feel like my playing had also progressed a little bit from 2013's album Glass Idols by that time. So I decided to kind of introduce the album just full out shred right away. The whole intro is just 2 guitars going nuts in a kind of this frenzied kind of scrambled sound, and then just kicked right into the riff, which is very much like an earlier Olsonuf kind of riff from my 2003-2004 era kind of style of playing. So it's a lot of stuff that I used to do and maybe got away from a little bit on Glass Idols, but that was probably more driven by the lyrics and the points I wanted to make than most of the music I did. But I've always kind of thought of this whole idea of saving your soul to be very much like a protection racket, like the mafia would do. You know, nice soul you got there. It'd be a real shame if anything happened to it. So be over here on Sunday with money. Bring cash, because that's exactly how it works out. It's totally a protection racket. It's exactly what's going on there, and it's just no one really calls much attention to that because they're over here like waving at, hey, look, your spirit. Can you point out exactly where that is, please? Where is that spirit? Because I know where there's a body, and I know there's a lot of electricity and all kinds of other. We pretty much know everything about the body, but I also know that we have an imagination, and it can be very vivid at times. But how can you tell the difference between your spirit and your imagination? From what I can tell, the spirit is the stuff that you imagine that you want to be true, and all the other stuff is the stuff you're okay with being imaginary. But if people promise you that you're going to suffer forever, you might take that spiritual side really, really seriously and indeed show up with the cash every Sunday like you're told to. So it seems like that's what's going on. So hopefully not. Sadly, probably. This is one place you know where it's going, though. If you give it to me, I'm gonna put it to good use. Something that make me happy.
There you go. And to buy things for August.
Basically. Yep.
All right. Well, I think we're gonna check out another track here from Olsonuf. Here's The Legacy of Rome. Crank it up.
The legacy of Rome still lives on into the modern day. First to militaristic conquest, and built upon the backs of slaves. Invading foreign lands and then wondering why they hate us so much. How would it be if the tables were turned? The founding fathers adopted a system already corrupted, so now we'll just sit back and watch.
that was Legacy of Rome. Tell me a little about that track, please.
That's always something I've been kind of thinking about. I'm like a huge avid fan of history, and especially of the Roman Empire, because in a way it's like the blueprint for most of the empires that have ever happened. Or maybe, I don't know, most empires tend to look at themselves as a republic while being an empire, and they're no different. When the period that we think of as the Roman Empire started, they didn't just start calling themselves an empire. They just went on calling themselves a republic, all like they always had. And around the middle of the 1700s, all across Europe and over here as well in the U.S., there was this resurgence of an interest in trying to recreate that state of the Roman Republic, and some of them succeeded, some of them failed. Ours did quite well, and we are sort of living on in that blueprint. And in a way, like I said, I mean, when they became what we consider the empire, they didn't stop calling themselves a republic, but they did start to have a primary citizen, which is what we think of as the emperor right now. It's where we get the word prince, but it means first, or first citizen. And really, when we rebuilt our sort of Roman Empire over here, or Roman Republic, I should say, in the U.S., we didn't install 2 consuls like they did. We installed 1, a president. Now, we get the change every 4 years, and that's more like the consul, but we do have 1 primary person in charge, and that's a little different from how Rome did it. But when I look back, regardless of the minor differences there, we adopted a system of a republic that first became corrupted into an empire and then was just sacked by, enemies eventually. They pissed off enough people. And it's like, if you look into the past at certain things, you're really looking into a crystal ball that can tell you the future too. Everybody went around creating a system that we already knew was corrupted. We know how the story ends. And then, there's not a single empire that's ever existed that didn't fall eventually. So, just that song's just a big reminder of what we exactly built upon. That's the crumbling foundation that we decided to set up shop on.
And I mean, even back then, yeah, they battled a lot, but we're still battling.
Oh, yeah.
And it may not be in the same way, but there's still battles going
right
on. And it's just no one's coming to a happy medium over anything.
Yeah, really. I mean, we're in comparison to Rome, the U.S. is extremely fortunate in having only actually had 1 formal civil war, where they every single year they were having, the entire second century. There's actually a thing called the crisis of the second century, because things were just constant civil war, because the way that their system was set up is the loyalty of the military was to the individual commanders, not to the state. And so you just had all these competing generals who decided, I want to be emperor. Yeah, well, I want to be emperor, and I'm going to kick your ass. And eventually you just turn the entire empire upside down, trying to, fulfill your own ego trip, And so, I mean, we at least in the modern era have this somewhat revered value of seeming civilized. So it doesn't necessarily get as bad. Not as many assassinations, not as many togas, but that's but we're at each other's throats a whole lot in these last couple of years. It's been a very divisive decade, really. It's actually maybe the last 2 decades, really, but maybe I was just too young to see better.
Maybe.
2
different countries have, with different things like the bullfighting and things. It's just like,
yeah,
it's like amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are changing now. So you never can tell exactly what the face of the future is going to be. But yeah, in the end of that, I mean that song was just a kind of like a reminder. Hey, no matter what this is, it's not going to last. But let's try to salvage it a little longer, because I mean, the Roman Republic itself lasted almost 500 years. We're just like half that way. Hopefully we can at least, even in their flawed footsteps, we could go a little longer than they did. But because, we kind of look back at that time period as a much more brutal, barbaric time period. But, like in all our politeness, we can't, we're having a hard time getting through here. And and it's already two very major factions ripping at each other's throats all the time. And it's kind of a shame. But it's just meant to be sort of a little prophecy. Hey, this thing's not going to last forever, but
Exactly. Now, with your books that you're writing, I know people out there, if you didn't know, Jason's an author as well. He did write Book of Sequences and Fictionary. We have the Book of Sequences. That's really, really cool. And we have yet to see Fictionary, but tell us about your books.
So the Book of Sequences was something I started about 4 years earlier. I started working on that in 2013, and at least I had the idea for it, and it came and went as I taught Shred Mentor students various things. I find sequences to be one of the most powerful tools for just about anything musical, from writing melodies to practicing effectively and getting to know your fretboard and training yourself for technique and speed, and writing solos for that matter. But it was something that really took a while, and suddenly I guess, see, I end up going through like a 5-subject notebook about every 6 months to a year, just in my own, scribblings of madness as I'm going and just trying to keep up with my own brain. But some of the little pictures I drew for myself eventually kind of crystallized a way to illustrate how to show sequences in a way that can make sense for pretty much anybody looking at them. So finally that all kind of came together. So during a couple of weeks in June in 2017, I decided to just kind of make that happen. I had already had a guitar clinic coming up in like a couple months after that, so I figured, you know what, I'm just going to go and kind of have a book ready at that time. It was on the same topic anyway, so I was going to kind of factor it in. And so that kind of came together rather fast. And then actually the following month, I actually just kind of cranked out Fictionary, which has nothing whatsoever to do with music, but I mentioned I like puns, and for like 2.5 years before that, I had been just amassing a bunch of silly ass words that I'd been coming up with that I just thought, were funny, and if I could come up with a definition for a silly ass word, then I can just make a little mock dictionary of words that basically I called it, the subtitle of the book is English Words That Don't Exist But Should.
That's funny. Now you just need to make a book of all the phone calls that you get and the prank phone calls.
Yeah, my SoundCloud account is just completely full now. I have no room to put any music up there because of all those things. Those phone calls go on so long. But
In line with you, because I've had one before. The guy was calling for Niagara Mohawk, and I told him I was Amish. He laughed at me and said, "Really?" And he hung up on me. I'm like, "Oh."
Oh, how unsatisfying. Yeah, I don't have too many of those calls anymore, luckily. It's because of GoDaddy. Whenever I register a website, just with anything, like with whether it's music or a website or any idea, I try to flesh it out in a very basic way right away. So like when I register a new website, I don't really get the private registration.
Right.
So within about 3 days of registering a new domain name, I start getting flooded with phone calls from just usually the same places, because sometimes I save the numbers for particular places that were memorable for one reason or another. Mm-hmm. And so I end up like, oh, hey, they're calling again. So I know I can kind of fuck with them a little bit more.
Yep.
But yeah, basically my goal is they stay on the phone with me because that's my goal, is to keep them on the phone as long as I possibly can. So which is why those phone calls are over. Yeah, they're like, because I know all they want to hear is, yes, I'm ready to pay right now. So I keep reminding them in between severely stressing them out. I try to promise them that they're going to get that money they want. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I mean, they're just, if it wasn't me, they're going to be, taking advantage of some poor retired person somewhere who can't afford to be losing their limited income. And so I figure, somebody that grew up on Jerky Boys, and especially from Jerky Boys 3 onward, they started doing like pranks with incoming calls, or they put like ads in the paper and purposely mess with people calling them. I think that's like the ultimate thing, because this is I always like to pretend to be the prey when I'm really the predator anyway. So my favorite prey is somebody who thinks they're the predator. So I especially love it when somebody calls me trying to fleece me of something and scam me, and I pretend. That's the best time to play stupid.
Let them do it. Yep.
Oh, I will play. I will be as dumb as I can as I need to be, really, for that whole phone call, because the hardest part is just containing the laughter each time. because I love to just latch on to some word they say.
Mm-hmm.
And then just go nuts with that idea, just go riffing on an idea. I had one last year where somebody called me it was your standard car insurance thing. You know, that's the one going around, but they actually got a live person to talk to me, and they sounded like an American. Most of these calls, most of the ones I've recorded, the person has a very thick Indian accent. So I know there's obviously a booming industry in India to go and try to target American, gullible enough Americans and fleece them their money. But this person was an American woman, very clear American accent. So I was like, okay. So you're doing the insurance scam thing here. Okay, I'll tell you what. I got 12 cars I want to insure. Let's get going. So it was funny. I just went nuts with just like, okay, all right. What's the most ridiculous thing I can plant into this conversation, and let's see if they stay on the line.
That's funny. Well, everybody can check that out on, you said, your SoundCloud, right?
Yep, and that's soundcloud.com/Jason Aaron Wood. It's one of my playlists. I don't remember.
Let everyone know all your social media sites, where your merchandise can be purchased, where they can pick up Fictionary, and...
Yep. Oh, and actually, there's actually a new book, too. I'll start with the books, because basically, shredmentoronline.com is where you can find the Book of Sequences, as well as a new book that I just came out with in May, which is called The Top Secret Book of Practice Routines. It's only 60 pages, but it's full color. I ended up getting a lot of people asking me, usually when they reach out, they don't know how to practice effectively, and almost everybody I talk to is missing something. So this is kind of my way to sort of crystallize that information after finding myself having the same conversation over and over and over again. But you can find that on shredmentoronline.com/products. All my books are there. Actually, you know what? Fictionary is not there. That's on jasonaaronwood.com/products. Since it's not music related, I don't want to put that on Shredmentor because it's really just unrelated, and it's just a bucket list thing I wanted to do. But as far as Facebook is kind of my primary social media place aside from YouTube, so it's facebook.com/Jason Aaron Wood page. I'm posting a lot of videos there, so that's actually a really good place to keep up with me. I'm pretty much maxed out on my friends list, so if you're into my music, please just give me a page like rather than a friend request, because I've got barely any room. Outside of that, though, the Shredmentor YouTube is also not just for Shredmentor. I also put my own stuff up there, too, and like I said earlier, I mean, my music with Ulsonoof and Jason Aaron Wood, and maybe eventually with some Todespon and stuff too, is going to eventually bleed into Shredmentor, rather. So, I mean, like, anything I do as a musician, if anybody wants to learn how to do that or something like that for themselves, that's what Shredmentor is all about. It's basically being the guitar teacher I wished I always had, but never really could find one ready to just give me the results now. So shredmentor.com for lessons. So facebook.com/Shredmentor Rock Guitar Academy. It's kind of a long URL, but that's me on Facebook, and a lot of those videos show up there as well. Outside of that, Ulsonoof and Todesbonden, just type that after facebook.com, and that's pretty much it for that.
All right. Well, tell Lori we said hi, and we're, thinking of her new music. We can't wait to hear it. And could you do a shout out?
Indeed. This is Jason Aaron Wood from Ulsonoof and Todesbonden, and you are listening to the Thunderhead Show on MetalDevastationRadio.com, where metal reigns supreme.
All right. Thank you very much, Jason. Do you have anyone to give a shout out to, or anybody out there?
I want to give a shout out to my friend Richie and Mike from Gravehuffer. Kick-ass band, really cool guys. I'm really enjoying what they've been coming out with lately, and I look forward to the next stuff.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been great.